Hello everyone, and welcome to my review on Euphoria Season 2. I was meant to do this review so fucking long ago, but I didn't have a mic, and so I was unable to. Now, one thing I want to say before we get into this, I've made a decision. TV show reviews will naturally be longer because TV shows are longer. I don't know what to say about that. And that's what I'm doing here. That's why the movie reviews I feel like we want nice, short, go watch the film type reviews. But this I wanna do that kind of thing with TV shows, but also just have it a bit longer, you know. And I suppose that if you're not into that, you can always turn it off. So let's just cover it. So it's taking place right after season one, after the specials, you know. Rue is on this kind of drug-fueled bender, and Nate's dad is an absolute stain of cunt. He is possibly the most aggravating character in TV currently. He says to his children, yeah, I'll fuck men, I'll fuck women, I'll fuck transsexuals because I'll fuck whoever I want to fuck. Basically, he acts like a fucking child going around casual sex and says it's okay. I'd be fine with all that if he wasn't having sex with 15-year-olds because he is a paedophile. And the show makes that quite apparent, but it still wants us to kind of feel a little bit of sympathy towards him. Maybe a situation, you know, maybe a heavy bit of trauma. Fuck off, you're a paedophile, okay? That annoyed me quite a bit. Now Nate is a character I can kind of start to feel sorry for, okay? Because, you know, he is, I suppose, a victim of circumstances. Of course, he's an arsehole. Everyone in this show is a despicable person in their own way. Except Ali. Ali is amazing, and I will not have you diss him. Although, you know, he had some troubles in the past before the show started, so then you kind of think, you know, everyone's fucked up in their own way. But Jules and Rue, them two, very tense, very teen, melodramatic scenery this season. I'm trying to remember so much because it's been so long, but my absolute favourite character I mainly remember about Ashtray, played by Yavin Walton, and yeah, amazing this season. Him and Fezco are the reason that I love this show so much. Their brotherly relationship is the best aspect for me of the show, and I really hope that they find a way to somehow continue that in season 3. No spoilers, but yeah. Now I want to discuss a little bit more about the idea of social media addiction. You may remember, or most likely not if you didn't watch it anyway, in my season 1 review of Euphoria, I mentioned how this takes a more modern Gen Z type approach to social media as opposed to the more, I suppose, moralistic, hierarchy, negative of social media. It pushes itself towards realistic ideals in that sense. Like, it explains social media has very bad aspects, but also it can be a place where people can find a voice. The marginalised can have a voice, something which in today's world is not simple. It deals with a lot of the LGBT issues that are currently facing my generation. It also deals with, you know, the absolute drug fuel of it, like the drug-fueled school and I suppose economic, sociological nightmare that we are facing, it doesn't cover us. It doesn't say like uncover really the COVID, the pandemic. It does it in a more isolating way anyway, because it tells us that through social media, through drugs, trauma, sex, all these things, we're already isolated. COVID just kind of pushed us further along that isolating path. And that is so apparent this season because every single character who is surrounded by loved ones can still feel so isolated. The idea that someone can be surrounded by people and yet still feel like the loneliest person on this planet we call Earth. It's truly a beautiful and powerful statement that I really feel Sam Levinson is trying to elevate, and perhaps some of the ideas got lost in its own surrealism this season. I have heard some people complain about season 2, saying it's unrealistic, it gets lost in its own surrealistic fantasy because the lines between reality and fiction do get blurred in a significant way in the medium part of the season. However, I'd like to offer you an alternative perspective. Perhaps there is a reason for that. Perhaps because we are so lost in the world of social media, social etiquette, and all things anti-social, surrealism is realism because that is reality. That is our reality. Now, as for the trauma, the show is definitely not one to shy away from these tough topics of abuse, transphobia, pedophilia, racism, drug abuse and self-harm, all of which kind of coincide in a circular motion. In a teen drama, it's so difficult to feel that using people of a certain age, the actors are older than the characters obviously, but using characters of a certain age in this fashion can easily feel exploitative. It can blur the line between what is necessary and what is exploitative brutality, because there's a difference between brutally honest and honestly just brutal. This show doesn't know where the line is in that. I think in some cases that is definitely something that I feel a lot of people will have problems with. A lot of people have had problems with. It's not something that I personally consider too big an issue in the show itself when watching, but if you think about it upon further analysis, as it is my job to do, then it does become a relatively serious issue. There is also the complaint and affection of redemption. How far can someone go to be redeemed? This has been explored in other works like A Clockwork Orange and things. And how much of our choices are necessarily our fault and how much is due to upbringing and environmental factors? How much free will do we truly have? Especially for someone like Rue, who is an addict unable to control themselves. What turns someone to drugs? And why is it so addicting? Well, of course, there's scientific dopamine regulation and scientific explanation for these things. However, in terms of actual sociological pressure, that is pushed on us in a much further way. Now, people say that this show is pro-drug use, and I think that anyone that truly stands by this statement is not actually watched the show, because the show definitely takes a very negative approach towards drug use. However, it's also honest in its portrayal and says, for some people, it simply makes getting the day through easier. You know, like Ali said in the special, it's like, you know, when you're high, it's much easier to just forget because nothing else in the world matters. This show tries to tackle the modern world, and it's problematic only in the sense that it is not a world that any of us truly understand. I stand by that. The social pressure and misgivings of our reality do lend into the surrealism of what Euphoria is portraying, and that is why the cinematography is so rapidly colourful and visceral. Possibly, in my mind, images stand out to me that you wouldn't expect. You've got these great shots, and then you've got these shots of pure isolation, and it's really painful. It is. It's extraordinarily painful to watch sometimes when you think of it as if it's about you. If you watch the show like it's a show about you, if you watch this and you imagine going through the things that the characters have went through, there is no way that you can't feel a painful neglect on behalf of society. And I am not a social scientist or anything. I'm just a fucking reviewer. I'm just saying what my thoughts on this show are, for fuck's sake. If these are my thoughts, this is what I have. I mean, look at this. We got porn addiction in the show, you know, and then the show lends itself to damn near pornography at times as well. We've got mental amounts of drug abuse, and yet the abuse is so apparent that it's beyond the drugs. The drugs are simply a way of coping with the abuse, and yet they're also used to enable yourself more abuse self-inflicted. The sex is messy. The trauma is traumatic. And the social media aspects are so blown out of proportion that you'd think they actually took place on social media. An important thing to keep in mind. This show is the most talked about show on Twitter. Now, if that is not a reaction to the pseudo-logical, psychological even, mind of youth in modern Western society that the show is trying to portray and reflect on, then I don't know what I'm talking about. And let's be honest, I don't. None of us actually do. Do I sound like I'm ranting about stuff that's unrelated? Because if you look at the show through the eyes of someone who has experienced some of this trauma, then you'll understand that it is true, but it is also, in its own way, problematic and exploitative. That's not to say that it should be taken off the air or that it should be changed in any way. We just need to acknowledge that it is nihilistic, and perhaps for someone dealing with depression, it's not the best idea to watch this show because it can push you. It's very triggering and challenging for a reason, but the people that the show claims to try to help, some of us that it tries to help cannot deal with the themes that it betrays and the way that it betrays them, because the lack of subtlety is immediately apparent in this season. Season 1 dealt with this in a much more sensitive manner than Season 2 did, because Season 2 really pushed the boundaries of what is acceptable. And what is acceptable on TV now? That's a good question, because there is nothing that you can't really do on TV now. There's fucking sex, violence, drugs, pedophilia, necrophilia. There's everything, and you can do all of this in a teen show, and you can't be cancelled for it, which is a complete reverse of wokeism and perhaps a discussion on a social commentary of what we actually deem acceptable versus what we're willing to forget about. Or how much are we willing to ignore before we say it's enough? I'll leave that up to you. In my opinion, I'm perfectly fine with the show portraying things the way it is, but I feel that it's worth discussing for those more sensitive to the issues that it's trying to portray. I feel that it is definitely worth mentioning and having open discussions. Please have these in the comments about this, because I found my viewpoint change over the past 6 months about this show. I first thought, no problems. Anyone that's saying bad things about it is probably just, being offended because the show is speaking the truth. But now I'm not so sure, because there is definitely some aspects of this show that I myself do find problematic, and that is the primary reason that I wanted to record this review, and that is why this review is so long as well. I mean, other than the fact that it's a TV show, and I want to make my TV shows longer and discuss things more in depth. I'm not analysing specific aspects of the show, but rather looking at the narrative as a whole and asking what is necessary and what is unnecessary from a literal standpoint, but from an artistic standpoint we can accept. Because how far is artistry allowed to be pushed? Artists are there to push the limits, right? That's what they do. That's what we do. We fucking, as an actor, I feel the need to push the limits of what is possible. As a writer, I want to do that. And I ask myself, how far is too far? Is there such a line? And is the line that we create simply invisible because what was acceptable 10 years ago is no longer acceptable, but what was not acceptable 10 years is now acceptable? So where are you limiting yourself, and how are you allowing yourself? The content that you consume indicates to people, the companies, this is capitalism, right? If you want money, then you make things that make money. And clearly, Euphoria makes a fuck ton of money. So, even though that people are complaining about it, there is just like the show Dharma, although that is more based on true events, even though that they are discussing these issues and that people are pissed, the people that are pissed are still watching the show. And then people will say, well, don't watch it, but perhaps it's not as simple as don't watch it. Perhaps they want to watch it so that they can, in detail, discuss the problems that they have with the show. The problem with that being that fewer retention equals renewal on seasons. And then you're kind of in a loop, right? Personally, I love the show. Don't get me wrong. I know that I might sound judgmental of it currently. That's because even when I love something, as a member of Honest Game Station, as a reviewer, I've got to look at both sides of the argument, right, in these longer reviews. I always try to say, well, if I hate this, why does someone love it? Or if I love it, why does someone hate it? And there has never been a show that I can love so much as Euphoria, which is my second favourite show of all time, by the way. If you're wondering, my favourite is Freaks and Geeks. And there has never been a show that has divided my thoughts so much into, I can absolutely love this and still think and see how much of a problem this is. There is literal insanity happening with this show, and I question the need for a lot of it. And then I ask myself how necessary it really is. Is the demographic? The demographic, it's clearly an adult show that is aimed at younger audiences, right? You hear 13 and 14-year-olds watching this show all the time. This is the thing. So, are they deliberately targeting the show towards younger audiences while putting age ratings on it that claim it's explicitly for adults? Because I know a lot of adults watch this show, but I watch it like when I was 19, I'm 20 now. And it was definitely something that was aimed more at me and more at the younger people and our experiences in school. So, is it attempting to explain to the older audiences, or is it attempting to talk down or to us? There are so many variables that it is impossible to get into in a singular video review like this. I just wanted a chance to create a dialogue which allows people to openly discuss this, and that is what this comment section will be for people. If you are looking for a space to discuss these topics in depth, you know, the topics of how the show deals with pedophilia, with sexual assault, with transphobia, with trans rights, with the LGBT issues and the serious implications of violence and domestic abuse is not something I've even gotten into yet. But that is another massive thing about this show. I mean, Rue hits her mom in the face, right? That's a scene in the first season, and it's quite harsh. Season 2, Rue is still a piece of shit, but she's a piece of shit because she's addicted to drugs. How much moral virtue are you willing to spare for consideration? And how much are you willing to consider for moral virtue? I've asked so many questions in this review because as a reviewer, my goal is not to answer questions per se, but to ask them in thoughtful ways. And that is what I have in this particular review attempted to do more than any others, because there is kids dying out there, and we're making shows like 13 Reasons Why and Euphoria and eating this shit up because it's entertaining. But what good does it do? Genuinely, to the disheartened. That's my primary question. Because I deal with depression and anxiety, and I don't want to have to look at a show which is always depressing and nihilistic. I want some optimism, but nihilism can be great in films and shows if it's handled effectively. I just don't think that the nihilism in Euphoria, it borders on the line of edgy, not nihilism, but it takes the approach of nihilism and pushes it more towards entitlement and privilege, because the people that write this show are fucking privileged. Do they truly understand our struggles, or are they simply writing a eat the rich nihilistic show that's like, hey, we're going to appeal to teens so we don't actually have to do any of the work? You're not helping with your artistic license. You're damaging. I wonder if that is necessary. Now, do I see the positives of portrayal in this show? Yes, I do. I give this show a 10, a 5-star. I'm sorry, I don't sound like it in this review, but I do. I still love this goddamn show. I just have so many questions and problems that need addressing that I don't think we're going to get the answer to, because the show can deal with issues on a very surface level. Other than the special with Ali in the cafe, which delves deep into the issues, we don't get much below the surface. The show appears to be afraid of one thing, and that's delving into its own questions, asking its own questions in a deep and meaningful and effective way. It uses its characters as devices to tell the stories of disenfranchised youth without actually portraying a realistic approach to that. Is that a problem? Yes. Yes, it fucking is. Because I can ramble on and repeat myself over and over again. I'm trying not to. But the question of what does this show want to achieve is not a question that is being asked serious enough by the screenwriters, serious enough by the directors. It's a question that I believe the actors are trying to portray through their performances the best they can, but through only improvisation are we getting reality. The rest is pushed towards surrealism, which reflects reality, as I previously said, but could also completely separate the show from any ounce of aging well. Do I think this show will age well? Now, that is a tough one. That is a very tough one. I feel like for my generation, we're always going to appreciate this show in some way, right? Most of us will. However, I feel that for the upcoming generations, and maybe in 20 years, I don't think that this show is going to appeal as much. Like, if you look at older shows, like from the 90s, like The Sopranos, for example, shows that have aged rather well because they have timeless topics. This show feels more like a trend. A trend that is trying to impose on everything that we stand for as a society and call for revolution. Then simultaneously say things like in the special, we're fighting too many revolutions. So what is the message? What is the purpose? What is the theme? If you're watching the show, if you're just watching the show and you're just having fun, then yeah, you could just enjoy it. You could just, most people are just going to watch the show and enjoy it. I mean, I'm only, because I'm reviewing it, asking so deeply, because these are not questions that I would ask otherwise, I don't think. If I did not ADHD, like if my brain didn't have ADHD, and just like, if I didn't think about this so much, then I don't think I would come to these conclusions or these questions, but fortunately I have. So I don't know if anyone's watching up to this point. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. I made this video because I felt it was necessary to ask these questions. And ask so in... Fucking hell, it's been half an hour. Ask so in a genuinely honest way. In the only way that I actually know how, because this is just one person's opinion, let's be honest. I'm just one person. And a lot of what I say, a lot of the time on this channel, I'm going to get wrong. I'll admit that. No one's perfect. And I'll always get things wrong. That's fine. Because as a reviewer, I just want to talk about things that I watch. That's it. And sometimes I feel like I want to ask these questions. So yeah, thank you all for watching. As I say, it is still a 5-star 10 out of 10 season. The show is, I love it still. And yeah, definitely, especially the ending was great. And yeah, I hope to see you all in the next video, hopefully. It'll be a shorter one, like the movie ones are shorter. Like the movie ones are like 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes long. So go and watch them, I guess. Alright, thank you. Goodbye.